Mr. X's class. Today we're going to talk about the word parameter. Notice that it's parameter with an A. It's not perimeter like in geometry. It's parameter. Spanish, parámetro. Although I'm not sure, I think maybe that's not a very common word in Spanish. But parameter is something that decides or limits. The way in which something can be done. So it's like a limit or a guideline, or like a requirement or something like that. So anything like that would be a parameter. So depending on what situation you're talking about, you would have different parameters to think about. But it's like basically anytime if you're going to do something, what limits your decision or what limits your action? So like if you're doing an assignment for school, what are some parameters that you have to think about? Sorry? Okay, yeah, there are rules about different assignments. Like, for example, for a test, a parameter is don't use cell phones. For any kind of assignment, though, like if you have to write an essay about a certain topic, that's a parameter. You should write about the parameters of the assignment are write about this topic, this length. If you write about a different topic, you might not get credit or you'll definitely lose points because you won't be following the limits that the teacher set. So sometimes parameters are set by people, like when teachers make requirements. Like, for example, for the senior speech. Parameters for the senior speech. So one of those would be the 5-minute time limit. That's, the teachers decided that based on the number of speeches and how much time. We said, we'll make a 5-minute time limit. That's our requirement. But parameter can also be, it's anything that decides or limits. So, for example, the type of audience. That's not something that we directly decided. The audience is the students at the school. So when you write your speech, you should think about what kind of message you want to send to the other students. That's the audience. They're the audience. That limits the speech in a way because, I don't know, you would write a different speech for our students than you would for, a group of teachers, maybe. You would say different things. You'd say somewhat different things. You focus a lot on, encouraging students to keep going and not give up, right? Because that's the kind of thing that you're thinking about. A lot of people talk about issues like that, of struggling during school and how do you keep going. That's related to who the audience is. If you gave a speech to teachers, maybe you would talk about how to help your students effectively. How to be available for your students. That's a different speech. So that's part of what kind of speech is it? Partly it's because the teacher tells you have to do this. But also, one limit of the speech is who it's for. Because you would write a different speech for a different audience. If you're writing a speech for children, you would write a different speech. You would maybe put little cute stories and have animal characters and things like that. Or an adult would say, no, this is a serious speech. Maybe. I mean, depending on your personality, you could pull off animal characters. I haven't seen it, but if anybody wants to try, I'm interested to see it. But that would be very different. You could still give a message about working hard in school or something to children, but it would be very different. So that would be, so again, the type of audience is part of the parameters. Okay, and, but I also have a sentence, because I know some of you are in economics, right, or have taken economics or government. Mm-hmm. The Federal Reserve, probably you learned about that in both of those classes. It's the Federal Reserve Bank, which decides lots of things about the money supply and interest rates and affects the economy. So they make their economic decisions based on various parameters. So limits, so they look at all their data about, unemployment rate and the number of jobs and all kinds of things which you could ask Ms. Donner about in more detail, which I don't know exactly, but all kinds of information about the economy, and then they decide what should we do to help the economy in the best way, according to in their opinion. So all that information that comes in, that would be parameters, information that limits or decides what they're going to do. No word families. Synonyms, as I said, limit, restriction, or guideline. And over here we have a sentence about literature. There are many parameters to consider in evaluating a work of literature. So if you're trying to decide, is this a good work of literature? Let's say A children's book, you would evaluate it in a different way from a novel for adults. That's one thing, right? So, or also you would think about if you're evaluating means saying how good or bad something is. So you have parameters like based on what are your standards? What do you think a good book is? Those parameters might be different depending on what book and who you're evaluating it for. So there could be different parameters. Everybody say parameter.
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 Where's the stress, the strong syllable? Parameter. Rat. Second syllable. That's the stress. That's the strong syllable. Parameter. Which is the same actually as the Spanish. Okay, so are there any questions about parameter? All right, thank you very much. Thanks for filming.